welcome back, everybody. I got a new friend, Jesse. How's it going, Jesse?
It's going great, man. Blessed to be here.
You're an avid chess fan, just like me.
Yep.
I love chess. I don't know if you get tired of chess, but I could literally play for 5-6 hours a day.
Yeah, man, that's a lot.
Maybe not every day,
Yeah.
but I could do that two to three times a week.
Yeah.
Anyways.
It's funny because I resonated. Like my wife has told me I play too much.
Yeah.
She's like,
Yeah.
you need to stop. And so I've had to go through seasons where I actually had to delete the app off my phone because it was just becoming too much of so.
Most people, when I tell them I like to play chess, they're like, "Oh, interesting."
Yeah.
I don't know anybody like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, we met because we're actually here in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yep.
You're from
Sacramento,
California. I'm from Washington State, but we have a mutual friend, Alejandro.
Yep.
Who introduced us, and he told me beforehand, he's like, "Dude, you'll love this guy. He's a great guy, and you have okay, tell people real quick what you do, your family, who you are."
Yeah, so I have a video marketing agency in Sacramento.
Awesome.
And I've been doing video for 11 years now.
Cool.
So all self-taught, it was really just a God thing on how I even got into it. I have a music background.
Okay.
So I used to do Christian hip hop.
Oh.
I used to make beats. Yep.
Are we gonna rap
back
battle?
in the day? No,
No,
bro, it's been too long. It's
no.
been too long, man. But yeah, our music group, we had a little music group. It was called Anointed Noise Music.
No, okay,
Yeah,
that's cool.
So
Anointed Noise. I like that.
Yeah, man. So so my music background kind of translated into learning how to edit videos and things like that. So it was kind of a natural thing, but it really was a God thing. I remember I was sitting on a couch one day and this idea came into my head. I wonder what it'd be like to make movies. And I was like, well, you should probably get a camera. And literally, now I look back, 11 years later, and I'm like, dude, that was God, putting that in my heart.
Right.
Because it just unlocked so many things for me. And so I've been doing that. I'm married, been married for 9 years, 9 years in November, and got 2 beautiful kids, Josiah, who is 7 years old. That's my heart. That's my dude, man. That's my little prince,
Yeah.
And then my daughter, man, she's my everything. And she's
cool.
5 years old, Jasenia. And she's my entrepreneur. She's gonna take over daddy's business. She's a go-getter. She's driven. She's competitive. She's she's beautiful. She's a social butterfly. She's amazing, man. And really, I want to just say this because for those of us that are in business and growing things, a lot of times it could be difficult. There's a place we want to get to that we really feel like, oh, I haven't got there yet. But man, when I really step back and look at it, I'm a wealthy man. I have everything I need.
Yeah.
I have more than enough. It is a great reminder of how much God has done and how much He's doing, man.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
We were talking about last night. I mean, just kind of about purpose, calling.
Yeah.
People always wonder, what am I called to? And they're, I do fear that sometimes people maybe feel a little bit unfulfilled. And I get this because they're like, man, maybe I'm not on the mission field, or I'm not preaching or teaching or whatever. And what I try to do with people initially is I just go, hey, just so you're aware, 97% of what I do it has nothing to do with a stage or microphone.
Sure.
I remember the guy actually said this to me. We do these, at the time they weren't called welcome parties, but at our church, it's called a welcome party. It's every 6 or 8 weeks, I think. And it's just hey, if you're new to our church and you want to find out about who we are, we also want to find out about who you are. It's not super content or information heavy. There's a little bit of stuff, but people can ask questions, and afterwards they can sign up for a staff member, and we'll take them out to coffee and answer the questions, meet up with them, whatever. But really in that, we're trying to tell them hey, here's who we are. And if we're not the right church for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
We're not trying to be the church for everybody.
Sure.
In a sense, right? And there was a guy who come up who I'm at this table, and it's lunch, and it's a good time, and it's just a way for people to introduce each other, themselves to each other. And he goes, man, what's it like being a pastor? And I go, well, it's great, and like anything else, it's good. And I don't even remember what I said, but he goes, man, I would love to get paid to study the Bible 40 hours a week. And in my head, I'm going, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
No,
right.
That's not.
Right.
But
Yep.
But you got a bunch of entrepreneurs here at this mastermind.
Yeah.
they're all like, what's my purpose? Like, I want to do this. I want to build. I want to,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on people's calling? If a young man comes up to me and is like, hey, Jesse, I don't know what I'm called to do, what I'm supposed to do. Like, where do you start with that young man?
Dude, I let me just tell you, and for those listening, this is like a softball pitch. Because
you didn't tell me to say that.
I just love this conversation.
Yes.
I'm extremely passionate about it.
And by the way, people watching or listening, the hope is, like, we may dive off into some other subjects, but I would hope that somebody at least has some clarity.
Yeah.
By the end of this. So, okay, give me some of your thoughts. We'll unpack this.
Yeah. So, first of all, I actually have over 20 years in ministry.
Okay. So
I have more experience in ministry than I do in business. That's just been the last 10 years in official business. And then, going through, some pre-Christ days, I got some hustling business, there's some street business. But other than that, and I always tell that to people because I think, for a long time as a business owner, entrepreneur, I was a little insecure. Like, man, I don't know how to fit. I don't know how to fit in, or I don't know if I'm. One of the questions was, am I even made to be an entrepreneur? Because I kind of started later. From some of these, you hear these stories of people selling stuff, and like, I knew I was day one.
I graduated high school. I started my own business.
Yeah, I was the kid who in 4th grade they were asking everybody, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was just like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And I always felt insecure because everybody felt like everybody knew.
Right.
And I didn't,
You had no path.
I had no path.
Yeah.
And I think that is why I'm so passionate about this purpose idea.
Yeah.
Because growing up, I felt like I didn't have one.
Right.
Even when I got saved at 18 years old and came into the faith, I still didn't feel like it was clear. And, there was a lot of things that kind of just, there's a lot of stuff in my own self I had to grow through and all that. But what I began to notice in this 20 plus years of ministry is I'm not alone in that question. This was probably the most common question that I heard in ministry was, what's the purpose? What's my purpose? Or what should I do in this situation? How do I hear God's voice?
Right.
Should I take this job? Should I not take? Like, we're constantly in a situation of having to ask ourselves, like, what is the purpose for my life? Where should I go? What should I be doing? And so, in the beginning and earlier days, I kind of adopted this mantra that was taught to me, and I don't even remember who taught it to me, but basically they defined it like this: what's your purpose? To know God and to make him known. Like, that was your purpose. And so that became like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Like, that's some good copywriting, you know what I mean? Like, it's short, sweet, memorable, you know what I mean? Like, so that kind of was I kind of internalized that and was like, okay, what's your purpose? It's to know God and to make him known. And other than that, like, it almost doesn't matter, like, it's just like, dude, you're a speck, you know what I mean? Like, God doesn't, like, and that was kind of some of the theology that I kind of was raised in my earlier faith, right? Was just kind of this idea of like, dude, you don't get to tell God nothing, and you don't, but there's a heart posture that God has towards his children that wasn't quite explained to me. And so I kind of lived with that for, really about 10 years until life got really, really hard. It was a really hard season. It had different hard seasons, but one in particular where it really put me in this position to go, Lord, what's the deal? I need to hear this from you. Do I have a purpose, or am I just a generality? Like, I don't know what it was. Something in me I needed to know that from God. And it was kind of, that was the beginning of him showing me that, no, in fact, I did create you for a unique and specific purpose. And also too, yes, there is a general purpose. And so, I think that's where I'm just kind of giving you some of the back roads. That's where the passion comes from. But to answer your question, I really trace a lot back to this idea of having vision. When you talk about purpose, when you talk about following your purpose, when you talk about walking the path, when you talk about God being a light unto your feet, a lamp unto your path and a light unto your feet, like it's this illustration that we're walking in life with God. It's very heavy biblical language, right? Yeah. And clarity and vision is going to be the thing that we need to answer questions like that. So I think that purpose is more of a vision question than it is a kind of like overall, metaphysical, I think it has to do more with the vision of the believer. And so kind of to answer your question on that, and I'm kind of running a little long.
No, you're good. You're good.
But
no, it's good.
I've really tried to understand what is biblical vision, and how do we have it in our lives. And I'm not saying this is just kind of what I created in my own way of explaining it. So I'm not saying
no, you're good.
This is just kind of my definition of it. And this is what I tell some of the guys that ask me that question.
Yeah.
I would say vision starts with 3 questions.
Okay.
The first question is, what do you have?
Okay.
What do you have? Like, just simply put, and I go back to stories and illustrations like the widow and Elijah and Elisha, like, what do you have? It's just simply like God can work with whatever you have. Mm-hmm. There's an ongoing lie out there. And as a marketer, I know like people are always trying to convince you that you need something else.
Yeah.
You don't have enough. You're not enough. This is why you need this product or this service. And so, but God's marketing, if you will, God's message is, I've given you everything already. Right. And so I think that if we can kind of dispel that lie first and get to the point of just knowing, okay, first and foremost, I have what I need for the season where I'm at right now. Yeah. We can begin to kind of have some clear vision. So the first thing is, what do you have? The next thing is, where are you at? Like, where's God placed you? It was interesting because when I started finding success in my business was actually because God had to kind of give me a little bit of a shaking and go, hey man, look where I put you. Yeah. Which just so happened to be in government. And so I was like, Lord, I don't know nothing about government. Yeah. He's like, yeah, but I was there. I was a political media strategist for 5 years. Wow. And while I thought I was just there doing a job, it was actually, no, that's where the Lord placed you. Mm-hmm. And he was showing me. And when I leaned into it, business began to grow. So sometimes for us, we can be, what should I do? Where should I at? Or what should I do with where I'm at? Like, just take inventory. Where are you at right now? Because wherever you are, you have to understand that there's some divine connection to that. Maybe it's a person you'll meet, a skill you'll learn, so on and so forth. And the last one, which I think is the one that we're always trying to ask first, but we should be asking last, is, where are you going? Right. So what do I have? Where am I at? And where am I going? I think it's an important question to ask in purpose and vision. Like, what is the long-term goal, right? Like, where do I want to eventually go? Yep. But I think that we too often start with that question when we should start with the other 2 first. So, so that would be kind of my perspective on how to find and discover your purpose. No, that's great. And one last thing. This is, like I said, I could go on and on about this, but I think that I don't think that purpose is found. I think that purpose is cultivated. And I think that goes back to Genesis, and I think that goes back to God's original plan for man. So I think that it's more of a watering and a maintaining and a stewardship thing, taking care of what you have, taking care of where you're at, and putting before your plans before the Lord of where it is you're going. Yeah. And then stewarding everything he brings your way to cultivate purpose in your life. Yeah, and I do think there's this trap, which I think all those are good, because the more we can think or contemplate where we are in our life in terms of God's perspective, the better. So that's why I like those questions. Okay, where are you at? You think about that in terms of like, okay, God, what season am I in? Where like literally where am I at? Like all those things, right? But there's a trap where it's like, I do think whether it's a 21-year-old dude who's like basically feels this pressure, I got to have everything figured out right now. It's like, dude, life is going to change so many different directions. You don't have to have the whole story written. God already knows that. Like, you can trust in him. But or whether somebody's 40, totally different stages of life. I do think like what you do, especially if you're a man, not that this doesn't pertain to women, but just especially if you're a man, you can almost put all of your eggs in one basket and thinking like, my whole purpose is wrapped around my current vocation. Right. And it's like, I think if you ask most Christian men, what's the most important things in your life, they're going to get their priorities right on paper. Sure. I know I will. Yeah. Ask me what's the most important in my life, and I'll write it down for you, and you'll be like, man, Austin's got it nailed. Right. 100%. But then if you look at my calendar, where I spend my money, all of those things, they don't always line up. Right? I think that's probably true for all of us. We're all trying to line up actually what we value most with what we say we do on paper, right? And so I think most
most men, especially if they're a father, be like, oh yeah, God, family, but they don't feel like fulfillment in that. And I get it, because it's like, yeah, of course, you want to do something fulfilling. But you had 3 questions about vision. Here's typically, tell me what you think about this. Here is typically where I tell, and this is not original to me, but typically where I tell guys in terms of like purpose, calling, whatever, there's an internal call. That's like, what are you burdened for? What do you have a desire for? What are you passionate about? But then there's an external call. What I mean by that is, where are you gifted or talented? Like one of my mentors growing up, I would meet with him every Monday morning, which was my day off. And he would make me meet him at 6:30. And I was like, I'm like 18. I'm like, dude, I want to sleep in. I want to play Call of Duty till 1 a.m. with the boys, eating pizza, whatever.
Yeah.
And I would be like, I have to wake up early if I want to meet with him, And I would meet with him, and he would always tell me, it's great if your passion and your talent line up, but you should not pursue in terms of your vocation just with what you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
You should pursue what you're talented in. What are you actually gifted in? And I think we were just playing chess. I'm passionate about chess in some sense.
Yeah.
But I'm not talented enough to make that a career.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so it's like, it's like there's things I'm passionate about that I still do. And I find fulfillment in that. That doesn't mean I need to make it my career.
Yeah.
But then the last call is a formal call. And all I mean by that is, the formal call is like, is there an opportunity to do that in the workforce? Or an opportunity to start a business or something like that. And of course, if you get all 3 of those things perfectly to align, that's great. But sometimes I do feel like people mesh all those together. Well, I just have a desire from God too. And it's like, that's great.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you should drop everything you're doing right now and go full on after that.
Yeah.
You have to have some sort of humility and self-awareness to go. You should have somebody in your life that goes, I know you're really passionate about this. You're not actually very gifted.
Right.
Like, they may not say it that harshly.
Sure.
But you should, like, I would, Jesse, like, if you were that guy for me, right?
Yeah.
When I was a young man, I would hope you would tell me if I was like, hey, I'm going to start a video marketing agency.
Yeah.
Like, you might go, hey, I'm glad you have that desire, but dude, there's a lot for you to learn, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, you're not there yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And most people, I don't feel like, have that in their life. It's just, what do you have a desire for? God placed this desire in me. And we basically take all these little Proverbs statements and we ignore the rest of the reality of, like, there's more layers to this. But
that's a great point. And I think that, I would just kind of run that through that same filter. What do you have? Obviously not a gift to sing or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the honest thing. It's
Yes.
it's like, I really want to, I'm passionate about singing. And the truth is like, if you don't, then you don't. Well, that's great. But I want to be in the NBA. Well, it's not looking good for you. It's not something you have.
I would love to be an NBA player.
Right.
Dude.
It's just not something you have.
It's not something I have.
And that's part of having vision.
Yeah.
But here's one thing I do want to touch on, because I think this is a huge error that is leading a lot of people away, and especially young people. I think that there's, with social media and all of this stuff, there's a real trap on on following your passion.
Yeah.
And I think we don't really understand what that actually means.
Yeah.
And I would start out by kind of redefining that. See, the way that I view passion, like, first of all, you should never follow your passion. I think that's horrible advice.
What do you mean by that?
Okay.
Just to clarify, because
Sure.
someone might go, I'm passionate about missions.
Yeah.
Are you telling me I shouldn't do missions?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So here's what I would say. First is by redefining what passion actually means. People use it in today's context to mean joy, excitement.
What you desire.
What I desire.
Yeah.
But in actuality, that's not what it means.
Right.
We know that from, like, the Passion of the Christ,
Yeah.
right? Like, the word is actually the way that I would define passion. I think passion is important, but I think it's an indicator of what you're willing to suffer through in order to get to what you want.
Yes.
So, for example, I tried to start a drop shipping company when I first started learning in marketing.
Yeah.
I quickly realized I don't have the passion to endure all of the loss that comes with it. I was like, dude, I'm out. Like, I spent $2,000. That's $2,000 too much.
Yeah.
I don't believe in this. I don't see this. But here's another thing is God also too, and I believe this is a God thing, gave me a vision for something that I call Kingdom Creative, which is helping raise up kingdom creatives and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I've had that inside of me for 8 years.
Yeah.
It's still not something that's fully built out or developed, but I cannot get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a passion. In other words, if there's a better way, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not holding on to it because I'm holding on to it because it's a burden.
Mm-hmm.
It's a burden inside of me that is a passion. I'm suffering. My life would be easier if I just let go of the idea.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not working. It's not happening. I don't have the resources. I don't have the team. It's coming slowly. But in other words, the only thing that keeps that inside of me is the fact that there's a God-given passion for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, once we define it like that, then of course I would never follow something that is just burdening me. Like, nah, man, go find the way that gives you life and it's easy and it's, like work with the current, not against it, you know? So I think that's kind of how I would view it.
Yeah. There's a guy in my church who I really respect, an older man, and I don't even remember what the context of the conversation, but it was years ago, and I remember him, I think he got saved in prison, and grew up obviously not like Christian at all, and I'm saying obviously it's not obvious to you, but and I remember him saying, he's like, when I first got saved, and I got out and all this, and I got married and had kids, it's like, I thought I'm gonna sell everything I own, preach the gospel, travel in a van. And I remember, this is so long ago, and I remember him saying, oh, how stupid was I? And I think it's because, like, when we think of passion in terms of just what I'm most excited about, it's like, oh man, I'm just gonna drop everything, But let's think about what that means. I mean, that means possibly at the risk of neglecting your family or providing for them. And Paul does say, if a man, basically neglects to provide for his family, he's worse than an unbeliever, because that's your God-given priority and responsibility. So it's like, but also sometimes, we were talking about this last night, sometimes it sounds sexy to be like, I'm not going to be involved in any sort of job world. I'm just going to do kingdom gospel things. But we were talking about this last night, that Nancy Pearcey in her book Total Truth talks about how that verse in Genesis 3, where it talks about be fruitful, multiply, and then subdue the earth. Be fruitful, multiply simply doesn't just mean to have kids. It literally means to build civilizations.
Right.
And then to subdue the earth means literally to cultivate or create cultures.
Right.
So when, building churches, schools, educating people, like as an educator, any of these things is actually part of this thing that God commands us to do. Yeah. Like, that's actually doing what God has called us to do, is to create civilization and create cultures. Obviously, we want to create civilizations and cultures that submit to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. But we are all playing a part in that. Yeah. And I do think it's maybe because I hate making broad statements without real data or whatever. I don't want to be that guy who's always like, the church in America, like I'm the prophet of America, and the Lord's told me what every church is struggling with, Sometimes I do think that's just sometimes it can be spoken out of ignorance, a guy who grew up in one church, and he thinks that every church is like his church. But I do think there is this idea of, there's dualism. You have spiritual and good things over here, kingdom godly things. And then, my job as a janitor, it just pays the bills. And I get that it's not that exciting, but it's more than that. Yeah. You're cleaning a school for kids who go there. It actually does matter. Sure. Yeah. And so you have this dualistic mindset of, man, when I pray and I do spiritual things in the church, God's happy. But I'm wasting my time making money being a janitor. Yeah. Why do you think that? You know what I mean? Yeah. Why do you think that God is not pleased with you and your job? Well, you really think that God's like, man, I just wish you prayed the whole time. I wish you were lazy and didn't do anything. No, of course not. And I'm not saying those things aren't good. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, of course. But you create these categories.
Of course. Yeah. It's interesting because this is one that I struggled with as well. Like 20 plus years in ministry, 10 plus years in business. I've always and just being fully transparent,
Yeah.
I still have struggles with it at times.
I think we all
Thinking that like when I was on the mission field, God had a bigger smile than serving government clients. You know what I mean? When in reality, that I know in my mind, but there's still a disconnect in my heart sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that, once again, not to be that guy you said that you don't like, but or that makes those general statements. But I think the church at large has kind of,
from your vantage point,
from my vantage point, has kind of done a poor job at elevating the janitors or speaking to in just the way that the culture is set up with, we all come one Sunday, hear from one guy, kind of, I think that's created a bit of glorification in a way, which, is clear to see at times. And I think that for those that don't feel that, they could feel like maybe it's a lesser version. And then I also think too, it goes back to the purpose thing is, one of my favorite verses and one of the verses that really encapsulates this idea that I have on just purpose and all that is Ephesians 2:10. And it says that we are Christ's workmanship, created in his image. That word workmanship is the Greek word poema, which is where we get the word poem from. And it goes on to say that we're created to do good works, which he prepared in advance that we should walk in them. And so once again, that goes back to this unique and specific purpose. It says it right there. There's an understanding, a reason you were created that you should walk in. And so therefore, but this idea of just being his poema, his expression, his creative expression in this earth, I do think though that when kind of going back to the idea of these lesser versions of kind of like what God is pleased with or what vocations or whatever, I think that, it's often been understood that when I go to a job, I work for my boss. And I think that's where the individual believer could kind of like take some accountability. It's not necessarily the church's problem. It's like we've also done a bad job as individual believers at really grasping this concept that I work for God. It's a hard one in our culture.
There's a reality of course you work for your boss, like in some sense. But in another sense, you're right. There's something bigger happening.
Right. So, and I think, that's kind of what actually led me to entrepreneurship was the desire to be creative and create things that not just being dictated to me, like not just a boss telling me to create this or that, but my desire and passion to express value in the marketplace and create things. I think that's part of what really kind of opened up a different world. And truthfully too, with this whole idea of purpose, I do think that more believers should actually, they maybe don't need to be entrepreneurs, but I think they should kind of study entrepreneurship because it's been a whole nother lesson that I've learned so much more, even just about God, relying on God, how I view my business. Like when I wake up in the morning and I pray, I need the Lord to send me business. Like, it just creates kind of a different reliance upon him that is really produced some good fruit.
I remember Alejandro telling me one time, and at first I was like, dude, that's kind of silly. But then I was like, man, that's actually kind of cool. He told me, he's like, dude, I was helping a buddy. They hired my agency. They were about to do this huge launch for this online thing and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, a lot was riding on this. Like, it had to go well. Like, we had to perform well for them because they trusted us a lot. And there was a lot of money on the line with ads and campaigns. And he's like, dude, and like, before I hit, publish and like everything goes out, he's like, I prayed over it. He's like, Lord, like, would you put your favor on this and blah, blah, blah. And now that doesn't, I don't believe that, I believe God can sometimes work in spite of us.
Sure.
But I don't think in principle, God rewards laziness.
Sure.
So I'm not saying somebody could just be like, Lord,
hey,
that's like me taking all, 4,000 calories of Thai food. Like, Lord, bless us to my body. I pray that I feel great tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
It's like, God's like,
don't work like that.
Bro, if you stuff yourself, that's how,
Yeah.
But I thought that was a cool perspective. Okay, tell me anything of this, because I don't know if it's a theory or not, but I had this thought years ago when I was reading different portions of scripture, but one of them was Isaiah, and it talks about how some of the people of Israel, and it's talking about how they were called to be a light to the nations. And I thought about that, and people always get like weirded out about all the laws in the Old Testament, because there's the moral laws, which would be the laws that bypass the Old and New Covenant. These like the Ten Commandments. It's always not a good idea to not murder.
Sure.
Like
right.
whether there's a temple or not a temple, or
yeah.
Then there's the ceremonial laws are connected to the temple, and then there's the civil laws connected to the nation itself. And people get weirded out by those. And I remember thinking how those really only make sense to some degree when they're framed in the perspective of responsibility. So I remember hearing pastors, like youth pastors at conferences growing up, say, your identity determines your activity. Not what you do doesn't determine who you are. Who you are, determines what you do. And they just preach that so hard. And I think that's somewhat true, right? Like, my identity is rooted in Christ. That from that should flow what I do in my life. I'm on board. But I think there's another layer to it where I go, I think both are true. Just want to say that. But on the other side of it, I go, I think your responsibilities shape who you are. So, like, the moment I became a father, I drove home differently from the hospital with a little girl in my car.
Right.
And nobody told me to do that.
Right.
But I just felt the weight of responsibility, and that shaped what I did and who I was. I couldn't like do some of those things I did when I was a young man and dating and like stay up playing video games or whatever. I was like, man, we got to budget diapers in.
Right.
I naturally spent less on myself.
Yeah.
Nobody told me to.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I got a little girl.
Yeah.
That responsibility should, and so I do think a lot of the times, people aren't living fulfilling lives or doing what maybe God's called them to do because they haven't recognized the responsibility that's on them.
100%. And I think that's such a great observation.
You know what I'm saying?
No, that's such a great observation.
That applies to a lot of things, more than just fatherhood too.
No, yeah, absolutely. And let me just kind of give you a little bit on how I see that is when you look at, first of all, just when you look at the word responsibility, what is it? It's your ability to respond.
Yeah.
And most of us don't question our ability to respond until we're put in a situation where we need to respond. So in other words, you didn't know, and I had this very thing like, so I grew up without a father, grew up with some real father issues, like just do the whole kind of gamut, chip on my shoulder, all this guy, why didn't I have a dad? If I had one, my life would have been better. Then it's like, I don't need a dad, I just went through the whole, the whole cycle, and the thing about it is that this idea of, I completely lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. We were talking about responsibility.
Yeah. Okay.
Fathers.
Yep.
You always thought if I had one.
Yes. All right. So I grew up without a father, right?
Yeah.
And had all these father issues left and right, all this kind of stuff. And when I had my first son, my first child, I remember there was a bit of nervousness. I don't know how I'm going to be a father. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I mean, literally, there was some anxiety. I didn't have a model. And I didn't even grow up seeing one. Like, it's not like I had a friend who had a good father too. Most of them didn't have dads either,
Right.
So it was like this thing of anxiety. Now, I realized that previous to that, I had what? I had no responsibility because I didn't have a child. But when I began to have a child, it was so natural. I was so amazed. Before my child was born, I was in anxiety. I had to pray, Lord, I don't know, please help me. I don't know what to do. I don't know. But when I had my son, it just came so natural.
Right.
Even so much, even now he's 7 years old, people have commented, hey man, you're a great father. I admire the way you take care of your kids and stuff. And that shows me that this though, I didn't pull myself up, or God didn't pull me up to that place until I had that responsibility. I didn't have an ability to respond before then.
Yeah.
So I do think that, when it comes to purpose and people, in different seasons of lives, there are certain cases where you have an ability to respond and you're not responding.
Yeah.
And therefore you're not leveling up, if you will.
Right.
And so one of the quickest ways to level up in life is to respond to the ability that you have in the season that you have. I can think of so many scenarios. I was at a sales job, and it was just like I was being treated horribly. And I remember like I didn't know what to do, and it was just going through all of this stress. I was like, it was commission. They were messing with the commission money, and this lady my manager just like flat out told me like, I don't like you, and like was making my life. But it basically was an opportunity, a season to respond in a way that I didn't actually have to respond to in any other time in my life or my career or anything.
Right.
And I can look back at that moment and I can say there was growth that occurred then that still carries with me today.
Yeah.
Because I had a responsibility and ability to respond
right.
at that moment. So I agree 100%. That's a great observation.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because I know we're somewhat limited to time because you have to catch a flight and you're leaving in an hour, I think, right?
In an hour, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about prosperity, money, all that stuff.
Yeah.
One thing I actually talked to somebody that I really respect. He's well read and just a great thinker. I remember telling him, I said, what do you think that line is between I wanting to make more money and, I know it's probably going to be different for everybody. I'm not saying, hey, give me a prescription, but that line between I want to make more money when that turns into just greed. And I do want to preface this, just because somebody might be poor doesn't mean they don't struggle with greed. Like there's been times where my wife and I, we've had like nothing, like absolutely nothing, debt, no money in the bank account. And I might have been more obsessed thinking about money in those seasons.
Many times.
Right. And maybe some of that to give myself some grace, maybe some of that was just stress and anxiety. So I'm not saying like, probably a good thing, but I think whether someone's rich, poor, middle class, whatever, you can be greedy because of the heart, right? Regardless of the situation you're in. But I remember asking him that because I'm like, man, I have some of these dreams, things, whatever, that I want to do to make some extra money, but not just because of that. It's because I'm passionate about some of these side projects and creative outlets. And I'm like, but I don't want to become so obsessed with going, man, but at the same time, it's like, if I were to treat it like a business, you got to make money to have a business, you know? What are your thoughts on that? And then and then we can talk about prosperity, because that word is a huge word. So let's start with that, and then we'll talk about when people say the prosperity gospel and all that stuff.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I just love words that are so charged up. They're like hand grenades, because it's just fun to like go in there and navigate thought and navigate, challenge beliefs. And I'm just a huge proponent of
and I will just say this. I'm listening to this interview. Sorry, I totally cut you off, but on the plane here. Yeah. And it's this guy who I know of. I don't know him, who's an author, but also an Orthodox priest. And the guy who's interviewing him keeps saying, well, what about this with salvation? What about that with salvation? And I've read, I'm not saying I'm some scholar on Eastern Orthodoxy, but I've read enough stuff from Eastern Orthodox theologians and whatnot to know what their view is on salvation. And I go, they're not even talking about the same word. Right. And 10 seconds later, the priest goes, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. But like, what do you mean by salvation? Right. And he says it. He goes, yeah, that's not the way in which we use that word. Yeah. And so I think it's so important to define.
So here's what I would say. Like, this is to add more fuel to that already charged up word. Yeah. I would say this. God's original intent was for everything he created to prosper. Yeah. And so sometimes though, that could get people thrown off. Like, well, wait a minute. Like, so we're all supposed to be millionaires, we're all supposed to be, what about the guy in Africa, which is like the guy that always comes up.
What about Jesus?
Right? What about Jesus? But here's what I would say to that. I do think that this is a fun topic because it really does challenge some critical thinking. And I think that's healthy for the body. I think we should all be a little bit more critical thinkers. But I think that when it comes to prosperity, money is only a part of the conversation, right? Like money is a part of the conversation, but it's only part of prosperity, right? Like you can be a millionaire, obviously, and have a horrible marriage. Like your kids could hate you. Like, are you prosperous? No, not at all, right? So I do think
in one category you might be, yeah.
I do think it's important to kind of like understand that it's a word that it has, more than just a money conversation. But on the money conversation specifically, I would say that, what is that line of greed, right? Like that you talked about. I would say that, and how do you know if you're getting close to all that? I would say that it's an individual, personal experience, and this is what we don't like as people, humanity. We always like, just give me the line not to cross, and then I'll like get as close as I can and not cross it.
Right.
And that's completely the wrong mentality to have.
Right.
Like, hey Moses, you go up there and talk to God and just tell us what we need to do.
Yeah.
It's like, no, man, that completely removes the relationship that we're supposed to have. And I do think that there's some allowance there. There's been times where in my business, I can see that I was more motivated by money than I should have been at the time. But guess what? Being connected to God, he called me back. Like, like he's like, yo. And I think there's this stigma around at least Christian circles with this, where it's like, once you step over that line once, you're done. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, man. Like, yes, we shouldn't be greedy. We should always watch what money is doing to us internally. We should watch how it's changing our DNA and how we sleep and how we treat people and all of that kind of stuff, right? Because those are indicators on whether it's good for you or not. Yeah. And what your tolerance level is. Yeah. I might be able to make $100,000 and be totally fine. You might make $50,000 and just completely just be, some other character. Right. It's one of those things where it's like everybody's threshold is different, and you need to kind of look at what it's doing to you, and also to how it's impacting and affecting your relationship with God and all the other areas of prosperity. Yes. Right. And I think that I've seen times where I wasn't in my word like I should have been. I was irritable with my wife and kids because I was stressed trying to get the bag, and it's like, okay, in that case, bro, you need to chill out. You need to understand who your provider is. And you need,
Yeah, I think in like that circumstance, it's like when you're willing to sacrifice things that are more important than money, like that's when the pursuit of money goes wrong. Like, like if I'm willing to cheat somebody, lie to them, manipulate them, it is more important that I treat them with dignity and value, and as a valuable person made in the image of God, than to cheat, lie just to get money from them. Or if I neglect my wife or my kids or Jesus Christ or whatever, that's when. But I feel like if money is very powerful, Jesus talks about it like a lot. Yeah. And he does talk about it like he almost talks about it like it's a person. He's like, it's, it could be your master. Yeah. Like just that's kind of baffling. But if you can pursue making money without sacrificing those things that are a higher priority than making money, I'd be like, dude, if you can keep your heart in check, your marriage, family, like those you have a responsibility to make money, but you have higher responsibilities. Yeah. If you can keep the hierarchy of responsibilities in check, dude, put gasoline on that fire. Yeah, go make 20 million, 100 million. Of course. I think not at the expense of the other things.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to understand that money is more of a spiritual concept than it is a physical concept. Okay. And what I mean by that is that what is money? Money is the exchange of value that has been placed on something for something else. Right. Right. So you are saying that this is worth this much, right? By exchanging your money. If you hire me to do video production for you or whatever, you're saying that this is worth that. Yeah. And as long as I deliver or over deliver or whatever, you're happy, I'm happy. And I also think it's a mechanism that God uses in this earth to be able to do different things in this earth, reach different people. And so I don't look at it, at times I have, but I try not to look at it like it's a physical resource that needs to be acquired. It's more of a spiritual mechanism to be stewarded, and will God bless me with $5 million? I don't know. But if he does, I'm going to be ready to know what to do with that, Right. But until the meantime, I'm just trying to take care of what I have, where I'm at, and where I'm trying to go. Right. Back to that vision. Like the money, am I always going to try to grow and increase and create more value and duplicate my time and bless the lives of other people? And I think that's another thing too, is when money enters the hand of a believer who's committed to stewarding that money, then you can pretty well trust that as a good steward, it's going to go back into the kingdom economy for God to do things, tithing 10%, and employing other people. Like, he's going to use it as a tool. And so, I would agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do get why. Well, I'll just say this. There was a guy I brought on. So I did this podcast years ago, and then stopped for a multitude of reasons. Nothing massive or bad or whatever. Just season of life and whatnot.
Yep.
And it was actually, well, yeah. I don't want to give any hints as to who, but the first thing he says is, we have this interview over Zoom or whatever it was at the time, was, "Hey, my name's so-and-so." He goes, "And I'm a prosperity preacher." He goes, "You can put that in the intro, Ozzy." I believe it. Now, I knew what he was doing. He's kind of doing that on purpose because, I mean, maybe this is not true for everybody, but like, not that my parents watched this, but I was definitely aware of like some of those TV preachers growing up who literally would be like, if you sign up for 12 months, $1,000 a month right now, literally this guy said, he's like, "I will give you my favorite tithes anointed by God right now.
By a blessing."
Yeah. I sense the Lord saying,
give $1,000 seed.
Bro, okay, hold on. I gotta play this. Because my brother sent me this. The other day, and it's literally about money. Let me see if I can pull it up here. If I can't find it, I'll just tell you what he says. But yeah, I can't find it. It's in some, when somebody sends something like, was it email, text, Instagram, whatever.
Right.
But basically, this preacher guy with this big old bow tie on, just kind of, not judging me. It was just kind of like, wow, that's a bow tie. He goes, I hear the Spirit of the Lord telling me to ask you this: how much money is in your account right now? He goes, I don't have anything, sir. He goes, how much total money do you have right now? Everything you own, checking, savings. He goes, $1,100. He goes, the Lord said, give it to me now. Give it to me. He goes, okay. Like, literally, okay. And then he goes, because, and then he goes, literally, like, eyes get wide, and goes, why? And he goes, over the next few weeks, you would be surprised what the Lord will do. And he starts going, He goes, I'll transfer it right now. I'll transfer it. He goes, abundance, and whatever. Now, there's so much to that whole situation.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not possible that God couldn't speak to somebody to do something that maybe even seems unreasonable. I'm not saying that, right? But there's like this thing, like, if you grew up with the TV preachers and whatnot, it always felt a little bit, not a bait and switch, but like a little trade-off.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's like, it almost kind of feels like, when those people would be like, hey, some sort of like telemarketing thing where it's like, you want to be rich, get into this program, and in 12 months, you'll make 30 grand a month like me. And it's like this exchange thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm all for generosity. I'm all for prophetic ministry.
Yeah.
I'm all for breakthrough, blessing, favor of God. But like, why? You know what I mean? Like, that stuff was always so weird. And I think it put a bad taste. And that's where the word prosperity is like this, like, kind of makes me flinch a little bit when people use it sometimes, because I'm like, we're not talking about that, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge problem. And I think that, honestly, I think that's something that the enemy has created some confusion around. I don't like the term prosperity preacher, prosperity God, because prosperity is God's idea. The original prosperity is God's idea. And so therefore, and I get why the P and the P, prosperity, it makes sense. People,
potential, purpose, passion.
Everybody kind of like, oh, prosperity preacher, that kind of.
God will take your pain and turn it into a, whatever.
A promise.
Yeah, exactly. So your setback is a setup.
Don't forget, I used to rap, So we could, but I that's why I don't like it, is because it hijacked a word that actually belongs to God. Like, prosperity is God's idea.
But let me push back on one thing real quick. Yeah. I think a lot of things in Scripture, I would assume you agree with this, are both and.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I don't think it's a sin to be poor. By whatever standard we're talking about, let's just say you don't have a lot of extra at all. Your margins are super slim. I don't think that's a sin. I don't think it's a sin to be rich. I don't think it's a sin to be middle class.
Yeah, but even though I don't think it's a sin to be poor, I think it's sin that led to poverty.
Oh, because you're referring to Genesis, right?
Yeah, just period. Look at any impoverished nation, country, but whatever, and it's sin that created that.
Okay. So there's yes, but this is the both and part.
Okay, yeah.
Where I go, Jesus says the poor will always be among you.
Yeah.
Now, I think you would go, that's because of the fall and stuff like that.
Of course, just like the sick will.
Yeah, yes. But when people say God calls you to prosper, thank you.
Yes.
Here's the both and for me.
Yep.
Let's talk about it in one of the other categories. And we don't have to stay on this. I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this to you last night, but like the kid in my youth ministry, he was like a year older than me, and we were just like praying over someone, and he's like, it's not if, it's God's will to heal. It is God's will to heal. It is always God's will to heal.
Yeah.
And then I grew up thinking, man, I just don't have enough faith. And then I was like, what is faith?
Yeah.
Faith kind of felt like the Force in Star Wars, like this unidentified, undefined, like spiritual energy thing, and it's like, well, it's just trust. It's like, okay, God, I totally trust that you're going to heal this person.
Sure.
But they don't get healed.
Sure.
But then you look at scriptures where people don't have that much faith. Jesus literally says, you have little faith.
Right.
And sometimes he still heals them.
Right.
So I'm like, do we need faith? Is God going to work it out regardless? Mm-hmm. So anyways, all that being said, I'm rambling, but all that being said, I do think God wants to heal people in some sense on this side of eternity. But obviously we all die of something. So it's not like if God heals me of some sort of illness I have right now, it's not as if, oh, okay, I'm good forever.
Right.
He would have to continuously heal me for all of eternity.
It's still temporary.
It's still temporary.
Yep.
The fulfillment of that comes with the resurrection.
Right.
And so I think, obviously I agree with you about when we're talking about money and the fall and the effects of that. I go, well, yes, if there was no fall, there'd be no greed. And think about it, if there was no greed or selfishness at all in the world.
Right, I'll be taken care of.
The government doesn't do a very good job of dispensing money and handling all that anyways. Before governments got involved, churches did that. And I bargain churches do a better job of taking care of people than government does. Before we're going down a trail that, But I try to always be careful. Go, yes, I think God wants us to prosper. Yes, and I think we get glimpses of that, and sometimes even more than that. But at the same time, I also think the fulfillment of that prospering will come. In the new heavens, new earth, resurrection. Would you agree with that?
So let me tell you kind of my take on it. And I think this is important because I do believe that people have different views from different perspectives, and it doesn't necessarily mean one is right or wrong, right? Like people can witness the same incident and see it two different ways. Like we see that in the Gospels, like there's room for that in our understanding of topics like this, right?
Yep.
So let me tell you a little bit on why I kind of see it the way I see it. So I grew up in poverty. And I grew up single mother, raising 2 kids. Everybody was poor. And in those communities and in that kind of growing up, usually a lot of times the wealthy are vilified. There's a mentality amongst impoverished communities a lot of times. I don't want to say everybody, but at least for my neighborhood and ones I still are around. So it's there that it's like, we're not those people. Those people lie, cheat, and steal to get their wealth. We're hard workers. We work hard. We do this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of times it's meant to help to kind of create some pride and some identity around the situation. So there's almost like a mentality that our poverty is our righteousness. In the community. If you go to any impoverished community, it's really interesting. You can interview a lot of people.
Very interesting.
And one of the things that they're proud of the most is how hard of a worker they are. I do. I found my identity. Man, I'll work 16 hours. I'll go to this site, that site. My identity is in my work ethic. But if you look at the marketplace and you look at business, that's not how people are rewarded. The guy who's making the most money is not doing the most work.
Sure.
There's a different exchange of value that's taking place.
Right.
But see where I'm kind of a little bitter towards, and just observant of, is that corporations and people need people like that poverty mentality, or else they don't have businesses. People have been impoverished on purpose.
In other words, people need a boss. You have to have people working hard at all the levels.
There's people that profit off of people having that mentality.
Sure.
Being so dedicated to their work. So my thing is coming out. It's almost kind of like, and I don't want to be extreme, but like this idea of, like how Moses was in Egypt and he's seen, but he had a different heart, right? Like I feel like I've seen the subjugation of people impoverished so closely that I might have a little bit more of a heightened message on prosperity than maybe that message. And I would probably say it's probably not for a lot of people.
Sure.
But these people, they really need a hard push this way.
Yes.
Because they're all the way over here. And so for those people, I would say, no, I think you've been conditioned to view poverty. Like I remember a conversation I had with my mother. I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And I was like growing my business and things were going really well. And I'm like, yeah, Ma, I just, I'm trying to hit these goals. And I did it on purpose because I wanted to see, I was doing like a little experiment. And I was like, yeah, I want to make a little bit. My goals are to, it's very common in business to say project your goals and all that. It's no big deal. People wouldn't bat an eye. But I remember telling that to my mom and immediately, oh, mijo, don't. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that because then you're going to invite all of this temptation into your life. Not knowing, like, it was literally like $50,000 difference.
Yeah.
And she was like flat out worried about me.
Right.
Like you are inviting a curse on your life, son.
Right.
Because you're being greedy now. You're going out and it's just that kind of mentality that I have a heart to want to see
I think
broken
that's
off of the people
I think it's beautiful
that come from that same surrounding,
Yes. I mean, with that context, I go, that makes total sense. When people find their identity in something and then it becomes like a protection, like a mechanism almost, and it's like, like I agree. And then I think on the other side of things, like with like, I want to be careful, but there was a buddy of mine who I think has an entrepreneurial heart and has wanted to do, and I'm just trying to tell him like, dude, it's great you want to go after this stuff. Like where maybe the context you're talking about is like we want to stay back.
Right.
His like the way he grew up, he's like no, you got to move forward. You got to move forward. And I'm not telling him, hey, you need to make less money. Hey, you need to whatever. Right. Like I think if like a young man from that neighborhood or that context or that mentality comes to you, I don't think you're telling him like, hey, there's this, here's the number you have to hit to get out of this mentality. Right. It's more of just bro, you don't got to stay here. You can provide for your family. Right. You can be a blessing. You can make more. Absolutely. And you can do that while having a healthy marriage, while being a man of God, and while doing this. Yeah. You're not bound to this. Right. And then on the flip side, for like a young man, it's like, I want to tell him, hey, yeah, you can pursue all those things, but you're also not, your identity does not come from you hitting these new thresholds every quarter. Right. Right. And like I'm not going to look at you any different if you make 80,000, 200,000, or 500,000. Right. Like we're friends because we're friends. Yeah. So, but I agree. I would say one more thing. Yes. Just that I think it's an important distinction, right? Yes. And I think it also too shows a little bit on how the conversation is skewed to already preconceived notions about prosperity. Is we have a prosperity gospel, but do we have a poverty gospel? Oh yes. But I mean, has it been labeled that way? No, right. Like, is it called out the same way? Right. Now I get it. Like, but you and I would both agree that there are people that are preaching a poverty gospel. Like there's a certain level of like they're glorifying. And but by the way, what we mean by prosperity or poverty gospel, I mean, obviously there's those extreme cases of like the TV preachers who are just like outright, like outrageous. Some of them just say such stupid stuff. I have no idea how people even watch it. Right. But they do, right? They do. But I think what you're saying about poverty gospel, like there's a few guys who I think everybody would say, oh yeah, man, they are solid biblical teachers. Mm-hmm. And poverty gospel labeling it might be a little extreme, but
I just feel like it doesn't get the same attention.
I agree, but he will say stuff like the pastor, he doesn't live anywhere near me and I don't know him, but was literally talking about I don't even remember what the context was, but was talking about how they don't do certain they don't do snacks in the kids' class and all that. And all the money that would go to the, freaking veggie fries literally goes to kids in Africa at a thing they have set up. Now, there's obviously nothing wrong with giving money to an area that lacks financial means.
Yep.
But I'm like, it's not a big deal, homie, if kids have some veggie straws in kids' class.
Right.
Now, I'm giving a slight example. I could go more.
Yeah.
But he's like an avid person on trimming certain things.
Sure.
Because it almost feels like a sin to enjoy something.
Yeah.
But Paul says, I can't remember where. I think it's in Titus. He says, tell the rich of this age. Basically, it's something like they can enjoy their financial means, but to not put their trust in them. That's what he says.
Yeah.
So it's like,
absolutely.
What are you going to do? Buy a house and be like, I'm not enjoying this because if I find my joy in anything other than the Lord.
Right.
It's like, no, dude, enjoy the house.
Sure.
Just don't put your trust in it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Don't become prideful or whatever.
Yep. No, absolutely.
But I agree with you. People, I think I grew up with not because anybody told it to me, but and maybe not even as extreme as some of the context you're saying, but like, I did feel like, man, if I want to make X amount of dollars, man, now I'm thinking about it, I'm like going, maybe I did have that more. I was like, I thought I was selling myself. I don't know.
You know what's interesting is really
there's an internal thing though.
Yeah, there is, and that's I think what I'm pointing to, and this is one of the quickest ways that you can see it. And I've seen once you like look for it, you'll be able to see it everywhere. Is when people talk about money and immediately follow it up with a justification.
Okay, give me an example.
I'm looking at making, I want to make 6 figures this year, because I really want to like do more with my family and I want to like, invest in this and this and that. Like it's almost like there's an inbuilt guilt sometimes on monetary, like almost like there's a probing question. Why do you need to make that much? Like they feel the need to justify it.
Would you say though, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Would you say, and just tell me if you disagree.
Yeah.
Would you say you agree or disagree with this? Based on what you just said, it's not wrong to have maybe some of those reasons as to why you want to make more money.
Sure.
They might be legitimate.
Yeah.
And I want to take my family on a vacation. We don't have enough margin to save for a vacation. So I would like to make some extra money. It's okay to have those reasons, but I think what you're saying is sometimes maybe we always say that because it's like, I don't want to look like I'm some selfish, greedy person.
100%. We feel that there's a public criticism built into our head on having more than enough.
Oh, I'm 100%.
So we feel immediately
I'm guilty of that for sure.
We feel immediately the need to clarify why we would want such amount of money and what we would do with it. When there's no, like, if I say, hey, I'm gonna take my kids on vacation this year, I don't feel the need to be like, well, because it's been a tough school year, and they deserve it. We haven't, you just go, hey, because everybody understands, hey, you should take your kids on vacation, no big deal. But somehow when we come to these monetary kind of like, I want to make more money, it's like I feel automatically compelled to justify it because I don't want to be seen by you as some greedy, wicked, money serving, especially amongst Christian circles, when we're around other brothers and sisters in the faith and there's those conversations about money and things, we immediately, because there's like a built-in judgment that we feel like we have. And watch, now I mentioned it to you, you'll notice when people have these conversations, you'll notice an immediate, like they don't even know that they're doing it.
Yes.
It's just built in and they have to justify it quickly, like, because I want to do a lot of stuff. I want to, have more freedom to spend with my family, or it's like,
oh, dude, it's just so funny because I'm like the light. There was a little light bulb moment for me where I'm going, oh, I think you're 100% right on that. Because even as you're talking, you know what I thought before you said, people, before you said that, I literally thought, Yeah, I totally agree. But like, obviously, there's an extreme where people can just want money because they just want, which is obvious.
Yeah.
But I almost felt the need to throw that out there.
Right.
Right. Because
which is why it's interesting, and I've had this conversation with
I don't
several
know if people listening to this are gonna have like that little moment, but I just, not even that is the most profound thing you've even said, but I'm going, man, yeah, why is that?
It's an interesting observation for
It
sure.
is.
And as you observe it, I'm a student of just human nature. I a lot of times examine my own nature, like kind of just trying to figure out why I respond to certain things. As a marketer, I'm always kind of looking at how I respond to being marketed to, But I think that it really shows a lot internally on kind of what your stance is, what you feel like, where your invisible lines are that you have that you don't know you have.
Yes.
And I think that those lines, for all of us, I think that those lines are worthy of having a conversation with God about. Like, we should not just be comfortable with those lines. And I know for my life, if I would have been comfortable with the lines that I was given from my childhood, my kids and my wife wouldn't have the life that they have today. Like, I wouldn't have the life that I had today. We just bought a house in February of this year in California, which is one of the most craziest markets. There was up in
California, yeah.
So serious, real testimony here. In December of the previous year, like 3 months before we bought a house, I literally gave up on the idea. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. We were a single family household. It's just not possible. I couldn't, bro. It was so bad. I couldn't even rent a house.
Wow.
Because I didn't have enough budget to justify the expense. Nobody would even rent one to me.
Yeah.
So, it's like, but I had a belief. I had a belief, and I challenged those lines of what I thought was normal or what it was permissible for me to believe for.
So I think, tell me what you would add to this, because I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm thinking, man, that's such a great perspective. Maybe the two checks I'm thinking of after hearing what you're saying, and tell me what you would add or adjust, is what solves everything in terms of the mentality is, regardless of if you always want to justify things and you feel guilty about even wanting to make money, whether you're middle class, you're poor, you're rich, whatever, is your identity is not found in any of those things. So it's great if you want to make more money. It's okay if you're an entrepreneur and this quarter you made a little bit less money, because your identity is not in that. You're not you're not a loser now.
That's right.
If you make $2 million, that doesn't automatically mean you're a greedy, selfish, whatever. So identity. And then the second one would be is wherever you're at, to use your three things, wherever you're at, whatever you have, always try to maximize. That's the responsibility thing I was talking about earlier. Maximize what you're given. I think those would be two checks that I'm hearing from you. Identity is not rooted in that. That will fix the mentality thing. It's okay to want to make more money. That's great. Does God want me to? Stop it. Your identity is not in that.
Right.
Just try to maximize what you've been given. And if that means I'm a teacher, like I think in certain school districts, I don't know, maybe this is in all of Washington State, but if someone's an educator, they can educate me on this if I'm wrong. But I know this is true at least in some districts and whatnot. But if you have a master's degree, you can make starting off an additional $10K a year. That might be that thing where it's like, yeah, go do that.
Right.
That might mean maximize it. That might mean starting a side hustle or whatever. And then I think the last check is, but never at the expense of the most important responsibilities that the Lord has placed upon you. Would you adjust any of those or add anything to that? I'm trying to basically take this conversation so far and go, here's some concluding thoughts.
Yeah, I would say this,
because I really loved what you've said. That was very, very, very insightful. Yeah.
I think that we've all, in the personal development space, it's very common to talk about limiting beliefs, right? Limiting, but I do think that there's a spiritual perspective of having limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And I do think that if that is, let's just say for the sake of, this conversation, that is true, that there are limiting beliefs that we have in our life.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then, and I think most people would, right? But then that would tell you that you're not going to do what Ephesians 2:10 says and walk in your purpose. Those beliefs are getting in the way of who and how and what God created you to do and to be and to impact in this world.
Just like maybe it's overused, but it's the parable of the talents.
That's and that's another favorite one.
And I do think sometimes people take that one parable and extrapolate it so much.
I'm
and
probably
it's like,
one of those guys.
Well, and I think you can make it. I think we can draw applications, stuff like that.
Sure.
But I'm just saying sometimes we can take a parable and almost miss the primary message. Yeah. But I think it's right on par for what you're saying.
That's right.
The reason he didn't do
exactly right.
what he was supposed to do was because of, whether you want to call it a limited belief or a lie or whatever it is.
It was invisible lines he didn't want to cross.
Right. He thought the owner was an angry man.
Right. Right. And he thought, here's the trap is, and this is the trap going all the way back to Cain and Abel, which we talked a little bit last night about, which is a fascinating story. The problem with Cain was he didn't do it the way God asked him to do it. And he told him, if you do what I ask you, will you not be received?
Yes.
And so I think that problem is still plaguing humanity.
Yeah.
We're trying to solve our own problems.
Yeah.
And we're doing it based on the invisible lines that our experiences, our emotions, people around us, our communities have told us exist.
Yeah.
And we're trying to operate inside this invisible wall, and you're never going to do it that way.
Right.
And so I think God is calling, specifically within the entrepreneur space, because I'm really passionate, but also to the ministry space. I think God is calling us to challenge those lines, to bring them before him and say, okay, I'm committed to being who you created me to be, to doing what you created me to do. That is my mission. That is my assignment. I know it's unique. I know it's specific. I know there's a purpose, right? And I think that's important, precursor to it, right? And so therefore, every line that has been established up until this point is now able to be questioned. Mm-hmm. And I'm going before the Lord and kind of just being neutral and allowing you to reestablish these lines, not my culture, not what my mom says, not what my community says, but what you have said for who you've created me to be. Mm-hmm. And I think if we did that as believers, I think that we would, one, be surprised at what lines kind of get moved around a little bit. And two, we would experience more of the fullness and purpose that we're all asking over and over again. What should I do? What should I do?
Right.
And all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was just in New Zealand at the beginning of July. Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with John Bevere?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm familiar with him as well. Like it's not like I've read or listened to him a ton or anything like that, but yeah, I've listened to bits and pieces, and I think John's seems like a great guy. Mm-hmm. You know, I got to meet him, and he was a great guy. But I'm just, but he was talking about the parable of the talents, and John Bevere on the parable of the talents said this, and I thought it was so interesting. I didn't think it was interesting. I thought it was so good. Yeah. He said this. He said, God calls us to take care of the poor. He does not call us to take care of the lazy. Mm. Like laziness is just a choice. It's an evil one. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do anything, but I expect all these blessings to come. Mm-hmm. God will not be mocked. Right. You know, whatever a man soweth, he will reap. Yeah. My buddy Nathan Finocchio, I love this thought. I don't know if he came up with this or not, but he says, it's not about the poverty gospel. It's not about the prosperity gospel. Mm-hmm. It's about the generosity gospel. That's good. It's not about being poor. Mm-hmm. It's not about being rich. Mm-hmm. Like, we're missing it. That's right. It's God gives seed to those who sow. That's right. For the purpose of a generous life. Generous to your kids. Yeah. Generous to your wife. Generous to your church. Generous to the poor. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be legalistic about what John Bevere said and go, that's why I don't give to a homeless person. No, I don't know what I don't know the whole situation of that. Right. So don't. And honestly, the situation is irrelevant to what you're called to do. Right.
right?
But yes, but if a guy, let's say I have a side gig, like let's say the podcast is making enough money where I can hire somebody, and some dude is just lazy. I'm just going to fire him.
Sure.
Right. Are you paying somebody good money
right, no.
if they have a lot of experience,
that's right,
but they're just super lazy,
right,
and they just expect you like they to treat them like some superstar,
right,
but they just don't work hard for you.
mm-hmm.
Of course, you're not going to be just keep them along and
right,
because you wouldn't be a good owner, boss. You wouldn't be a good entrepreneur.
right.
It would be a hindrance to what you're supposed to do.
It's really interesting, and I think that kind of in this whole idea of purpose and vision and all this is that word that you hit on, and generosity is an expression of it.
Yeah.
But I think what it really comes down to is the primary responsibility of stewardship.
Mm-hmm.
And not to get off on another tangent, but what's interesting, and once again, I've really done a lot of digging in the first 4 chapters of Genesis. Has been I've been in it for the last couple of years now. Like just there's so much in there. But one of the interesting
Genesis is like one of, if not my favorite book of the
Bible.
Bible.
It is so rich.
It is.
But really the story of Cain and Abel. So what's interesting is, the actual kind of Hebrew names and the ancient Hebrew names of each of these.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is Cain's name. So his ancient Hebrew name actually means acquirer, like to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that kind of in the story that he was trying to acquire based upon his own means, that he was trying to do things his own way. And he even took matters into his own hands and murdered his brother. Right. And so we can see that there's this idea. There's, to me, what I've kind of just read between the lines a little bit is that we were never meant to acquire. We were never meant to possess anything. We were meant to steward. Mm-hmm. God didn't give us what he gave us to acquire more of. Right. What he did is to steward and increase and multiply unto the Lord, right? And so I think whenever we get in this situation where we find ourselves wanting to acquire and blah, 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 that's when you actually see a person get more stingy. Mm-hmm. That's when you see a person get less generous, right? Mm-hmm. And we see even in the scriptures, the world of the generous gets larger and larger, but the world of the stingy gets. So I love that concept. Yeah. And I think it also, once again, ties into stewardship. And this last analogy, I was having a conversation with an entrepreneur here, and he was telling me about he's like, man, he's in a rough situation in his business. And he's like, I was thinking about doing this and this and this and this and this. And I said, man, you're just like throwing a bunch of seeds out there. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I got to figure out which one's working so that I can kind of go in all on that and get myself out of the situation. And I said, wouldn't it be better for you to plant one seed and just focus on that one seed until it grows than to be planting seeds, like all of the energy and activity of planting a seed?
You can't water them all.
Yeah, because it goes back to God's original design for you to increase and multiply is not for you to plant 100 seeds a day. It's for you to take care of one. Yeah. It's not attractive to us, but it's the method of multiplication that works. Right. And we can see it in nature.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know we probably got to leave soon, so that made me think of Matthew 6, famous chapter where it talks about money and
kingdom.
To not be anxious about what you're going to wear tomorrow. I mean, it's one of the most challenging.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I mean, a lot of scriptures are challenging, but this one's particularly. Yeah. But there's a spot in here that I find so interesting. It says this in verse 26. It says, "Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them." Now, I don't think the implication of that passage is this, because it says they don't sow or reap, and look, they got food. The implication is not, we don't got to work. Mm-hmm. The implication, you're missing the point if that's what you think.
Right.
The implication is God provides, but they have to go find the food. That's the point. Mm-hmm. The point is that God did not set up the ecosystem in the world in such a way where the birds are constantly looking but never getting. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he's not making it rain bird food on them.
Right.
They have to go out and get, but he has provided out there. Yeah. So one of my, not mine, but one of the Bible college professors at the Bible college I went to when I graduated high school, who he passed a while ago, but he basically says this: in all of Scripture, there is a twofold, two-step, two-tier, whatever thing. there's God's provision
Mm-hmm.
and then application.
Mm.
So the provision is God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son.
Mm-hmm.
That's provision right there. This is him providing salvation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then the application is how you receive the provision.
Yeah.
You have to believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that I think as a general principle, that's true everywhere.
Mm.
Of course, there's provision,
Right.
but there's also application, and you will never see the provision without the application.
Sure.
So, man, great thought. I didn't think we were going to talk about. I didn't know where the prosperity stuff was going to go, but I thought that was a really interesting, great perspective.
Mm.
And Jesse, thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast.
I loved it, man. Appreciate it, brother.
If people want to find out,
Yeah,
just anything, stuff you're working on or whatever, tell people where they can go find your stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Appreciate that. So on Instagram, it's at I am Jesse Delgato.
Yep.
I'm heavy on LinkedIn as well for my company. Cool. I am Jesse Delgato. My company, Storyline Media Group, do a lot
Starlight?
of Storyline.
Storylight.
Yeah,
okay.
StorylineMediaGroup.com. You can check out stuff there.
We'll put those in the description too.
And then once again on YouTube, Kingdom Creatives. That's
cool.
This brand. Or you could also go to kingdomcreative.com. It's not really built out because I still working on it.
Yeah.
But man, I would love to connect. If anything resonated in that area, or there's any, like, I'm an open line. I would love to jump on a call with you or just talk with you or just do what we're doing today, man.
And I'm gonna do something real quick.
Yeah.
Because Alejandra's our mutual friend.
Yeah.
That connected us. Let's see if Alejandro actually listens to the entire episode.
Yeah.
Right? Or if he just says he did.
Right.
Because right now, I'm giving him a shout out for the connection because I enjoyed this podcast.
I did too.
And if he did not actually listen to the whole episode, but he tells me he did, but doesn't mention this, you and I were going to go after him.
I'm unfriending him on Facebook.
Yeah. I'm blocking him.
He's done.
Yeah.
He's done.
Number deleted. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hey, if you want more information about anything regarding the show, if you're listening to this, just check the description for the links for Jesse, myself, and all that other stuff. So, all right. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out, everybody.